Do you think we should start with milkshakes?
OK, so this is the sugar tax that's currently applied to sweet, fizzy drinks, and it's set to be extended to cover milkshakes and lattes. It applies to pre-packaged drinks. So if you go into a coffee shop and ask for your triple frappuccino with caramel and hazelnut syrup...
Sounds like you do that regularly.
I've never ordered one of those in my life.
Nor have I, can I say.
My coffee is completely black this morning.
Yeah. I've been with people ordering them, though, and it is a bit shocking.
How much sugar
goes in?
Right.
Why are they exempt?
Yes, a good point.
Why? I mean, if
wonder,
it's for health reasons...
I wonder it's because you couldn't rely on the barista to know how much sugar there is in that product.
Yeah, it's just like at home. You can get your cup of coffee or tea and you can put as many spoonfuls of sugar in as you like.
Yeah.
It's all about changing manufacturers.
Yes.
Because the whole... the tax, when it came in, I think they raise more than £300 million a year now, the Treasury, on this tax, because some big companies like Coca-Cola wouldn't change what goes into their drinks. But other manufacturers changed what went into their drinks. The whole idea is to get those people making pre-packaged, factory-made drinks to use less sugar, because there was an obesity crisis in the country where kids are getting bigger and bigger, adults too, and it's going to affect their life. So it's actually... I think it's a good tax, because it's a tax.
But the problem is...
If it works,
this is a tax on working people.
The problem is...
Keir Starmer pledged not to do it. It's a tax on working people.
Keir Starmer said...
But it's a tax that working people can avoid.
Exactly.
It's not like employers rate national insurance tax,
but
which
they did say, however, they did say they would not raise taxes on working people.
No. In fact, he went further. On 5 Live, Keir Starmer was asked whether he would widen the salt and sugar tax, and he said...
Back in 2023, this is.
And he said that he didn't want to add to the cost of living crisis by adding to the burden of food costs.
And this will.
It will. Now, but he says that was true at the time, and he didn't rule out introducing one should economic pressures ease under a Labour government. But I'm not sure that people would say yet economic pressures are fully eased.
Yeah.
Au contraire. Completely the reverse. It's got much worse. So that basis is false.
Come on.
No, what do you mean, come on? It's a tax.
I remember, right, T&C's clearly applied, but I remember when the smoking ban was coming out, smoking in pubs, restaurants, everywhere like that. I heard politicians, including some in Labour, say, oh, all my constituents love it, you're going to ruin their lives, they just like to go down the club and smoke, give themselves cancer, heart disease and everything else. Look, it's patronising to say this is just on working people. It's all working people's health matters too. And these big manufacturers can avoid the tax by putting less sugar in their products that they're poisoning people with. Yeah. I mean, that's quite simple.
Andrew, if the government raised the tax on tobacco, would you also consider that a tax on working people?
That's a very good point, actually.
That's why I always fear a question. This one's at you. This one's at you.
That's very good. Well, it's an existing tax, isn't it?
I've never seen this happen before.
Well, let me say...
I've never seen you clap.
This is...
shimmering jelly in the same way.
This is a new tax. This is a new tax.
Yes,
hang on.
So
it is different because...
It's an extension of the tax because it's a tax on sugar as an ingredient.
No, it's a tax on milkshakes, which we've never had before. So that's a new tax on working people.
Get your grab bag, we're in an emergency. Spare underwear needed.
I think Kevin had the assist on that particular goal.
Where's the defibrillator?
Well, actually, talking about grab bags, what happened yesterday in Portugal and Spain was absolutely remarkable because they are hot countries which are used to very intense periods of hot weather. But the Telegraph this morning blaming net zero for what happened. And, you know, we're all sort of scratching our heads thinking, hang on a moment, surely huge amounts of sun, any solar farm would have kept running. But this is the explanation, according to the Telegraph this morning, because there is no indication that it was a cyber attack, which is, of course, what everyone feared. And if it was a cyber attack, who's next? But energy experts, according to the Telegraph, say a reliance on solar and wind farms in Spain have left the region vulnerable. The country's increased its renewable and low-carbon electricity generation in recent years. 2 decades ago, solar and wind provided less than 5% of its power, but it is now 50% of Spain's power. And it is the traditional energy systems which have the mechanisms that allow them to keep running if there is a shock, whereas solar and wind do not have the same safeguards. So basically, they cannot keep, their mechanisms cannot keep the power running. Is this going to make Ed Miliband retreat further on net zero?
Sadly not, and apparently in January we came very close to a similar major failure, and we were assisted by power which we got from an interconnector from Norway. But there was a report by the European... Why are you laughing, Maguire?
Oh,
there was a report... There was a report... Hang on, there was a report a month ago...
Your expertise here is brilliant.
There was a report a month ago by the European Court of Auditors warning that countries' reliance increasingly on solar and wind power was making their power supplies more unstable.
Well, it's true. If it's suddenly cloudy or the wind doesn't blow, then of course it is the case that you have that instability, which I think we understand. But it's not clear that this was caused by a lack of sun or wind in Spain last week. It's something more harder to understand than that, isn't it?
Because you have a wind farm or a solar farm, it's just like having a power station burning gas or coal or oil. And then it produces electricity. It goes along wires and the switching stations. We saw what happened when the Heathrow fire, little substation, blacked out the busiest airport in the country. I think it just sounds... where's Dale Vince when you want him to explain how this is probably just a load of propaganda?
OK, so
come on.
Traditional energy systems have mechanisms that allow them to keep running. Electricity grids need what is known as inertia to maintain supply at a stable frequency. And that is created by generators with spinning parts, which wind and solar do not have. Britain's National Energy Systems Operator compared it to the shock absorbers in your car's suspension, which dampen the effect of a sudden bump in the road and keep your car stable and moving forward.
It's very interesting that Andrew should know that we almost had one of these incidents earlier in the year. Of course, when he was Deputy Prime Minister, Oliver Dowden did tell us on the Prepare website that we should all be ready for these contingencies and have a emergency pack, each of us individually, with a battery, a portable power bank,
torch,
spare batteries, a first aid kit, hand sanitisers, bottled water, spare underwear, everything that you need.
Have you got one?
Actually, spare underwear wasn't in there. I added that one in.
What? Spare underwear? I don't remember reading that.
I've got. I know.
It's a good idea.
You needed it 5 minutes ago when you were being asked about.
Asked about the chili.
But do you carry or have, on your person or in your home, a grab bag ready for these moments?
No, I do.
Shouldn't you?
I do have a torch and a radio which works on batteries.
But just about every phone has got a torch on it.
That's true.
Now,
but the phones were affected. The phones were affected by
but your battery, as long as your battery's running, you'll be able to use
we all have an
your
emergency pack?
Well, if Ed Miliband continues with this mad dash to net zero, which is costing every householder watching this programme an absolute fortune in their bills, costing us a fortune when he told us it was going to cut our energy bills by £300 a year, everybody knows they're going up all the time. Look, and now we know, potentially, it's unstable.
Now we know potentially. Look,
well, we've seen what's happening in Spain and Portugal.
You have to invest in the distribution network. That's what you have to do, and that hasn't happened.
Spain and Portugal didn't invest properly?
No, it got... They know now because they get extreme.
They get
extreme temperature changes.
Political problem for both governments. A big political
It's very solvable.
You can't keep the lights on.
Sorry, Kevin, it was catastrophic.
Of course it was.
And I don't know what the actual cost, human cost, has been, but I mean, you saw that roads. Absolutely
trains
broke down.
ground to a halt.
Ground to a halt. Barney Rubble here is jumping ahead on what caused it, just because he doesn't like advancements in science and technology.
You are obsessed by this green technology. Good luck, mate. We've now seen the consequences.
If we're going to make the advances, we also need to make the advances in the backup.
Exactly.
You're quite right, and we do.
And they didn't.
And there are issues. The reason we won't get off fossil fuels for a while is there won't be enough nuclear, and you can't store wind and solar at peak times. And you have to invest in the distribution network. And there's big rows now over where the power lines are going to go, because we have huge offshore wind farms. I mean, off Hull, I think you probably have the world's biggest wind farm, and it's going to get bigger. But you need new power lines coming through. People are against them. You're going to need switching stations. You're going to need everything like that. You're quite right. Batteries. Somewhere in Sussex, I see one's being built to store the energy. All that has to happen. But it is not to be... It doesn't mean you're against solar and wind power, because they will be cheaper and they will be
We'll
more
ask
secure.
the Home Secretary if we all need a grab bag now, and whether she
complete with underpants.
complete with underpants.
I can confirm that currently, I don't think she has one.
Right.
Oh, right.
This is a major revelation.
Do you have one, Ed?
What,
Would you share it?
No, but
with the Home Secretary?
If I was going up a mountain on an expedition up in the Cairngorms or something, I would carry a bivouac bag, a first aid kit, some dry food and some spare underwear.
Well, that's just... I'd have thought that was obvious.
I was a scout.
Right.
Oh, adventure scout.
Right.
OK.
You learn all these things.
Spare underwear, that's... sorry.
What a fascinating
It's a bit early in the morning.
It was in the list.
Fascinating childhood you had, Ed.
What?
You're an adventure scout.
Yeah.
I'm so thrilled to know.
Would you have your passing underwear to wave at a helicopter?
I think
you
Scouts do a fantastic job.
Do you not mock Venture Scout?
No,
I'm
but
not
can
mocking.
we get back onto the news of the day, which is about asylum seekers. And this measure, which is being announced by the Home Secretary today, and we'll talk to her after 8 o'clock, I think will shock a lot of people because they'll be surprised that it doesn't already apply. And this is that the law is going to be tightened up so that migrants convicted of sexual offences, even if their sentence was under 12 months, are going to be unable to claim asylum in the UK. So under the Refugee Convention, countries can refuse asylum to particularly serious crimes, but currently sex offences where the sentence is under 12 months haven't been in that category. I think people will be absolutely shocked to know that this is the case, because surely registered sex offenders should be refused asylum.
They should be deported immediately. But the problem is with this, progress with one step, but they will still be able to claim they can remain here under the Human Rights Act, if it affects their family. So it's one step forward, one step back. But we saw, hang on, we saw only this last week, I know it's not a sex offender, but a Congolese drug dealer, been in the business for 14 years. They tried to deport him. He's staying here because he has a sick child here and his child needs him here. Outrageous. Outrageous.
It can't be one step forward, one step back. I mean, surely changing this is more than a step
change the Human
forward.
Rights Act as well, Ed. Change the Human Rights Act to stop these wretched monsters claiming they've got a right to... They're abusing the Human Rights Act to stay here. So it's all very well the Home Secretary to announce this today, but they say, OK, I'll stay here because if I've got children, I need to remain here with my children.
It depends on the case. You can claim it, but it doesn't mean you're going to win it. The actual...
Shouldn't be able to claim it.
The UN Refugee Convention actually has an exemption for sex offenders and says if it's a serious crime, and sex offences are usually considered serious crime, that's it, you can't claim. So it's a matter of implementing the law. I've noticed the criticism from refugee charities is that it's rushed. And they say it's pandering to very reactionary people. They haven't criticised, as far as I can see, the substance of it itself. Because I think, look, I welcome refugees. I'm pro-migration. I hate a lot of scaremongering. But if you're a sex offender, no.
Yeah.
No,
if
you're committing a crime like that,
case,
no.
Doesn't it? The Clapham acid attack, who turned out to have a sex offence conviction.
Yeah, from Afghanistan.
But it was less than 12 months. Then actually, shocking to discover that.
It is.
So sex offenders, foreign sex offenders, will still be able to appeal their asylum rejection and removal from the UK in immigration tribunals under the European Convention on Human Rights. But ministers believe courts will be more likely to support their deportation or be able to promote their deportation if they're judged as serious criminals. So it's like reclassifying them as serious criminals, and then the convention won't apply.
And it is the right of anybody to have an appeal after a conviction, a ruling, a verdict. Whether you were born in Britain and you can go all the way back, you're lying to Alfred the Great. If you're convicted of mass murder, you're still entitled to an appeal. Doesn't mean you're going to win it. It's basic to have that original decision challenged, whether it was fair and accurate. Doesn't mean you can stay. You're a sex offender. You've raped somebody. Off.
It comes to a deeper issue, which is that if Parliament legislates in law to say, which is what this is, an amendment to the law, to say that under 12 months is still a very serious offence, does that mean that that is something which the judges then take more seriously in an appeal than they otherwise would?
Why doesn't Parliament have the right? Why are judges overruling Parliament all the time. How did that happen?
No. The judges apply the law.
In their interpretation.
Well, of course, it's everybody's interpretation of the law.
It should be a blanket law out.
Yeah. OK, so let me give you another example that reported in the Times. A Jamaican man who raped a sleeping woman cannot be deported from the UK after release from prison because he's bisexual. The Home Office had attempted to deport him after he served a 7-year sentence. It's already classed, clearly, a serious offence. But an upper tribunal judge rejected the arguments by the Home Office lawyers that the man remained a danger to the community because the judge ruled that after considering expert evidence on the situation in Jamaica, the offender had a well-founded fear of persecution.
Because I think in Jamaica it's still illegal to be gay.
So if he's bisexual, he can't be deported now.
Outrageous.
So will
this is human rights, you see.
still apply then on appeals if the government tries to change the law, make sex offenders with a sentence under 12 months serious criminals? If someone says, well, actually, I'm bisexual and can't be deported back to
human
the country,
rights, my human rights.
If that is the case, change the law again.
Well, get the human rights out of it.
You'll have to go and live quietly in Jamaica, and he may not be able to
is there even
live
a
his life
shred
fully.
of evidence he was bisexual?
If he's convicted of rape here, I'm sorry, look, he's forgone his right to be here. If somebody's fined for shoplifting, I'm not right. I think that's very different.
Yeah.
But if somebody has committed a serious violent offence and is a rapist, no. That's it. It's gone.
And say what if he gets into trouble when he's in Jamaica? Too bad.
Well, I mean,
should have thought about that before he raped someone.
Yeah.
And that's where the difficulty will be for the judges.
But it does come to this
send
issue.
someone back to almost certain persecution.
They should think about that before they commit the crime.
Well, he's persecuted a woman, the sleeping woman, whoever that person is, that survivor. I hope she's on the mend and getting support. But he's forfeited his right. It does come to this issue,
which Andrew is raising, I think rightly, and this case raises as well, which is, if you leave the ECHR completely, then you solve the problem, but then that creates massively greater problems and would be a huge U-turn. The question then is, if you're not leaving the ECHR, does Parliament have the power to change the context in which judges make these decisions using the ECHR? And it should. Yeah. But at the moment, it's not clear that that works effectively, and that's what they need to sort out.
They have to, because I think this sort of stuff, I mean, this Jamaican rapist, it just drives... It's outrageous. It sickens people that the law is... this is two-tier policing again, isn't it?
No, it's not two-tier.
Yes, it is.
The law has been abused by people...
We allow a rapist to stay what he can. He can carry on raping.
The European Convention of Human Rights is for us all, and it's protected how women used to be treated in court cases when they were alleging rape. Disabled people have used it to get their rights. It's for us all. But you will get people who will use it.
And they have done.
And they
have been. And they continue.
But they're the cases that get shouted
human rights to think that you're right.
And look, the Home Secretary must deal with this issue.
It was used to ban corporal punishment in schools, cases in the 1980s when Thatcher was in power.
Because those were the days.
But it's there for us all. And it always just gets... as if it's just used by rapists, foreign criminals, whatever. It's not. It is there for us all.
It's abused by some of the worst criminals in the country to stay here.
In this case, it's clearly... so we'll ask the Home Secretary about that after 8 o'clock. The front page of your paper this morning, Kevin, is behaviour at the BBC. The report which says that a small number of BBC stars and managers behave unacceptably at work and bosses are failing to tackle them. Is the BBC... does it have a fundamental problem, or is this a problem with certain individuals who think differently?
I don't think it's unique to the BBC, but we notice it because it's such a big, trusted corporation, respected around the world,
and then paid for with
licence fees. But and then you get cases like Hugh Edwards, and all the alarm bells and warning signs were missed. The complaint wasn't handled properly. You can go back. I mean, I find it astonishing they employed Jimmy Savile, who got away with absolutely impunity, or Stuart Hall, who I remember doing It's a Knockout and football commentary, sex offender too. And somehow its fame can protect people. Yeah, it can corrupt. What power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And these people get so big and they're so powerful, they think they have an impunity. And often they've been treated with kid gloves, when if it was a cleaner or a lowly journalist or somebody on security, they would have been dealt with immediately.
But the issue is, you know, Kevin, if you're talking about Stuart Hall, these were things which happened when he was presenting It's a Knockout in the 70s into the 80s. These are issues which came to light 10 years ago, the Jimmy Savile kind of scandal 10 years ago. And the reason for this new report is because the BBC, in the case of Hugh Edwards, but in other cases as well, has been failing to tackle things since then. So it's not simply about the historic cases. Why are we still, in 2025, dealing with these problems now?
And has the BBC ever forced Hugh Edwards to repay the money he was paid from the moment he knew he was going to be charged with a very, very serious offence? And I think it was, about £300,000 of public money? He kept it. Outrageous. So that's a failure of the BBC. Wouldn't they have dealt with somebody else differently?
The striking thing to me is that this report feels like, you know, very similar to the report they wrote 10 years ago. Well, why isn't change happening fast enough?
What, you mean the bolt in the stable door after the horse has gone again? And, but I think if they keep bringing in procedures, they're going to get there eventually, aren't they, and be able to deal with it better. You've got to hope. Because it damages the reputation.
They have to be treated differently, I think, because it's
broadcaster every time.
At the highest standard, because it's public money.
Well, I actually...
That's why it's different.
But I think you should hold your stars, your big names, people you beam into households to a higher level of accountability than people who you don't. And, in fact, it's been the other way.
Can we just turn our attention to matters in Canada? Not something I would normally say at this time of the programme. But the former governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, has just been elected leader of Canada. And we have a breaking news part of his speech, which we can bring you now.
America wants our land, our resources, our water, our country. Never. But these are not idle threats. President Trump is trying to break us so that America can own us. That will never, ever happen.
One of us in this studio has had dinner with Mark Carney and knows him pretty well. So, Ed, is he the man to stand up to Donald Trump making a land grab for Canada?
Look, he has absolutely seized the moment. And the reality is, you know, he was never a politician. He was the governor of the Bank of England. And at the time when he said he'd stand to be leader, just a few months ago, everybody thought that they were finished and had no chance. The Liberals were out. Trudeau was very unpopular. What happened was Donald Trump then says, I'm going to declare economic war against Canada. I'm going to make them the 51st state. And Mark Carney has stepped up and he's totally transformed Canadian politics. He's just won an election. He's going to be Prime Minister for the next few years. What a turnaround.
A stunning rebuff for Donald Trump.
So it's Trump won it for Carney?
Absolutely. And here's the thing.
Destroyed the Conservatives.
And does the King go to Canada to open the Canadian Parliament? What would that say to Donald Trump?
And
he could. The Queen opened the Canadian Parliament before. It's part of his realm.
And, you know, and as part of our new international kind of reach, the same thing is happening in these days in Australia. I mean, the Australian Prime Minister called an election, Albanese. Everybody thought they were going to lose the election. Trump has now kind of come centre stage. The Canadian opposition are, you know, Trumpite. Suddenly, really unpopular.
They're finished. Yeah, so does the King
Very revealing.
Go to Canada?
Fascinating.
Yeah, but our mini Trump in this country, Nigel Farage, is now distancing himself from his big friend. He used to be all over him like a rash and saw him as a plus. But in fact, Trump is so destructive. He is destroying right-wing Conservative forces around the world.
He's no longer an asset as a friend. OK.